In the lead up to the Rugby World Cup Final, World Rugby's Council held a number of meetings here in Paris, and we took the opportunity to catch up with the president of Rugby Africa, Herbert Mensah, to find out a little bit more about his roles and responsibilities, his vision for the growth of the sport on the African continent, and of course, the importance of the Springboks' success in helping to channel that growth.
Now, that's a difficult question. Look, we're here to try and grow rugby. Africa is the continent that I represent, and we're really trying to, within the context of what World Rugby allows us to do, to try and find ways in which we can actually increase the base. We know we've got South Africa, which is almost like standalone, but as we keep saying, it's part of Africa, but we've got 39 other unions who are now trying to play the game, who don't have the money, there isn't the skill set. We know what happens when it is that we can get investment to help them grow. You then suddenly have the beast. And we believe that's right across the continent. It's very difficult where we're in a position where we get a budget of around about $2.25 million a year for 39 unions, competitions, training, education, the whole works. It doesn't quite work. So what I'm trying to do in this period, I'm quite new to this position rather than to rugby, is to try and see how we can't increase that base, how we can't get more governments involved. Look, the government of South Africa have done very well by the Springboks, and as they should do, because the chief marketing officer of South Africa, forgive me to say, are the Springboks. But for the rest of Africa, it's a little bit difficult trying to get governments involved and let them understand that the greatest game on earth is the basis for developing society. If kids get in there and they understand respect, solidarity, working together, the key components of what rugby is about, better society in a continent that has the greatest athletes on earth.
And it's a continent that has been largely dominated in terms of team sport by football. So how does rugby go about addressing the challenges of lack of resources, access to facilities, the cost of travel and logistics?
No, you're absolutely right. Because look, every kid wants to play rugby. They would like to get into touch rugby, you know, dodging and ducking and whatever else. It's more fun than just kicking ball around here to here and then falling down and pretending you're injured and the rest of it. But the fact is the infrastructure is not there. Not many countries in Africa have rugby fields. So that's the starting point. So we're trying to get it adopted by school curriculums all the way around. The Getting Into Rugby program is huge. We need to start building up a database of kids from a younger age going up. And really, if we can get the politicians to understand that it's actually better growth path for kids, then that would be a huge start. Look, some countries are taking it very seriously. We've seen recently with Kenya and Uganda and Zimbabwe, Namibia obviously is, you know, and then the ones up in the north. I was there recently with Morocco, who've been readmitted, and Tunisia and Algeria. There are countries in Africa who are now beginning to put more and more money in it. And I think we saw with the recent Sevens tournament in Harare and the one in Tunisia won by the Boks and the one in Harare won by Kenya, that the standard has just gone. That means the investment is getting back into place, but it is not enough.
And how does one prioritize the individual needs of unions, specifically against the high performance standards that are ultimately set by World Rugby?
I think that is a big thing. Look, sports has changed. We're talking rugby now. And you look at the World Cup today, if you're not professional, you can't compete. The greatest games of rugby that I've ever seen were the 2 quarterfinal matches. Forget the results for 1 minute, although no, the Springbok one, so I can't forget that, right? Okay, but let's forget the rest. The physicality that was involved, you know, for us who played rugby a million years ago, you just don't know where the engine power comes from. The recuperation, we should be talking to the doctors, the medics, the nutritionists, because when you get beaten up against Tonga, you know, because as tough as the Springboks were, they came against sheets of iron, and then pick yourself up. And then you're into the next battle again. Then you're into the next battle again. Then you're taking on the English, and you had us worried for a minute. You know, all jokes aside, you need a complete structure. It's no longer a one-off game. It's now a lifetime in 6 weeks that you've got to put your bodies through, you've got to prepare yourselves for. And most unions just don't have that money. They might be able to have one good game, but to go along that stage and to reach where they have, you've got two teams in the finals. And let's talk about the Springboks, because I think they've had a tougher run in terms of pure physicality. It means that you're now developing the superhuman being. And that's where we're getting. So those countries with no money, no pitch, the odd pair of boots, they could be as skillful as anything, but they're not going to be able to make it.
But what kind of challenges are you facing in communication between your participating unions? Are there challenges because of language? I know a number of French-speaking countries in Africa versus the English-speaking countries. Is that a challenge for you in terms of achieving the alignment that you want?
Yes and no. For those who really love rugby, the answer is no. There's always the issue of Franca and Anglo, which I'm removed. I've said there is no such thing. I'm the first Anglophone president of Rugby Africa. I don't know for how long, but I am. But seriously, it's getting people to understand that rugby is bigger than everything else. And trying to get, especially on the Francophone side, an understanding that there is a way to do it. And I can say that without seeming to be biased, because the number one team in Africa, the world, is South Africa. I keep making these mistakes. Then it is you come to Namibia, and then Kenya. You see, you're going in that progression. Algeria, Uganda, Zimbabwe. It's Anglophone. So we really need to realign together Africa as one to now start pushing, getting those governments who want to help so that we can push some of those teams upwards. Then the argument that we have that why has Africa only got one team apart from South Africa, that you now have a 24-team World Cup structure with time delays in terms of promotion, relegation. That works in our favor, not against us, because we're not going to, in 2 years, be ready for that jump. But in 4 or 5 years, we will be ready for that jump, which is why Africa has taken a slightly different position than expected by others. And we stand very strongly with South Africa, knowing that the pathway, the other competitions that are taking place, are such that we should be in a position in 3-4 years' time to benefit from this 2014.
That's a very important point, isn't it? Because it's fair to say that Rugby Africa has not always been aligned with South African rugby, but just listening to you, that very much is no longer the case. You seem to be completely aligned.
Totally. It's funny. It didn't take me long to realize that I'm African. South Africa is African. And I can't speak for my predecessors, but it just begs belief that we would be on the same continent, understand that our problems are similar. We have histories that are similar in different ways. And we are enjoined by virtue of geography. And yet it is that Rugby Africa would now align itself, say, to France. And I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, because I'm building up a wonderful alliance with Florian Grill and the FFR, French Rugby Federation, and everything that comes with it, because it always comes with a lot. That we are doing. But as I said at the council meeting 2 days ago, and I stood up, I said, these are our problems. Nations Cup is not our problem. Underfunding is our problem. 2 funding cycles where you've forgotten about Africa are our problem. And then before I sat down, but we are firmly aligned to the Springboks.
So taking that a step further,
yes.
the on-field performance and the success of the Springboks, how important is that for you to spread your message throughout the continent?
The most humble captain at this World Cup, the statesman who should be actually the Secretary General of the United Nations, is Siya Kolisi. And that picture, nobody's Madiba, so let's not get confused. But that picture and the imagery of him through every newscast across Africa, people who don't understand rugby will understand a captain who picks it up, bloodied and beaten, and says, we are the champions of the world. And for those who are stop jubilating and listen, he'll say, well done to the opposition. And the captain of the opposition, well done. And you'll have images of him. The other day, I stood in the box after the Springboks narrowly got through. They must stop doing that. Okay, I'm 63. They must stop doing that. But when they went through, I then looked, and on the Springbok side, I saw Sia doing what Sia does, and which now all the Springboks do. But I noticed it in Japan, and I've noticed it again. And that leadership is that picture, that image. And we can go through the ages where I wanted freedom, I wanted justice, I wanted to see Cassius Clay win matches. And then I saw Michael Jordan doing the hoops, and they were symbols of hope for the future. And Sia, in his quiet way, leadership way, represents that. So his winning, his participation is something that is critical. To see Sia come on for 50 minutes or 55 minutes and get substituted, and those who don't understand rugby say, why is he being taken off the field? And see Sia on the side of the pitch, clearly having given 150% and shouting, and people are running to the line. That is the symbolism of hope that Africa needs, the kids. And don't forget, when we say Africa, we're black, we're white, we're funny colors, we're Arabic, we speak Arabic, English, French, we're Muslim, we're Christian, we're mainly animist, I think. We're all sorts. And I think that is why even being where we are right now is a victory. Even being where we are now is a victory. People will remember France versus the Springboks as maybe the greatest match in the history of world rugby. They will remember the toils against England. They will remember things that, of course, we're now into the finals. And of course, we want to win. But I think that in the new Springbok that you see today, it goes beyond victory. And so they're the ambassadors of something bigger and greater than anybody could possibly imagine.
So that unity for the continent is of vital importance. Herbert, we wish you well with your vision, and thank you.
Absolutely, but don't forget, if you don't have 1.4 billion Springboks behind 23, it ain't going to work.